Get out before security drags you out. Thomas hissed the words into my ear, his grip on the podium turning white. He thought he was whispering, but the microphone caught every syllable of his rage. I didn't flinch. I didn't whisper back. I leaned directly into the mic, so the entire room, his investors, his friends, his creditors could hear the verdict. Security, you might want to save them for yourself. Dad, before I tell you what was on the document I was holding, and why the police were already waiting by the exits, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, and what time it is for you right now. I want to see how far this story travels. 13 years ago, the rain didn't sound like applause. It sounded like a verdict. I wasn't a risk auditor back then. I was just Wyfred, 15 years old, standing in the center of a bedroom that smelled like lavender and iron. Haley was 12. She sat on the edge of her bed holding Dad's antique letter opener. There was a thin red line running down her forearm, blood dripping onto the pristine white rug. She wasn't crying. She was smiling at me. A cold, thin expression that didn't reach her eyes. "You should have let me borrow the dress, Winnie," she whispered. Then she heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. The smile vanished. She threw her head back and screamed a sound so raw and terrified it made my blood run cold. The door flew open. Thomas and Susan rushed in. They saw the blood. They saw the blade on the floor near my feet. They saw Haley sobbing, pointing a shaking finger at me. She tried to kill me. She said I was a brat and she cut me. A normal father would have asked questions. He would have looked at the angle of the wound. He would have seen that I was standing 10 feet away. But Thomas wasn't a normal father. He didn't look at me with anger. He looked at me with relief. That was the moment I finally understood the architecture of his mind. Thomas suffered from the gatekeeper's delusion. He didn't see us as human beings with independent souls. He saw us as assets in his portfolio. Haley was the higher performing stock, pretty, compliant, valuable. I was the defective asset. I was too quiet, too observant, too difficult. To a narcissist like Thomas, a child isn't loved. They are managed. And when an asset becomes a liability, you don't fix it. You liquidate it. "I knew it," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "I knew you were sick." He didn't call the police. He didn't call a doctor. He marched me downstairs into his study and slammed a piece of paper onto the mahogany desk. It was handwritten, the ink still wet. "Sign it," he ordered. I read the words through my tears. It was a confession. I, Wyfred Sterling, admit to violent tendencies. I am voluntarily leaving this home because I am a danger to my family. I am a runaway dad. I didn't do it. She did it herself. Please sign it. He cut me off. Or I call the cops right now. You'll go to juvenile detention. You'll be in the system until you're 21. Sign the paper. Leave quietly, and I won't press charges. Susan stood in the doorway watching. She knew Haley. She knew her lies. But she said nothing. She chose her comfort over my life. I signed. My hand shook so hard the signature looked like a seismograph of an earthquake. I thought signing would buy me time. I thought it would calm him down. I was wrong. He grabbed my arm and dragged me to the front door. He opened it. The storm wasn't just rain. It was a tropical depression battering the coast of Charleston. The wind howled like a dying animal. "You're a liability, Wyfred," he said. "And I'm balancing the books." He shoved me. I stumbled down the wet steps, landing hard on the concrete driveway. The rain soaked through my thin shirt in seconds. I turned back, gasping, ready to beg. The door slammed. Then came the sound that has haunted my sleep for over a decade. Click. The deadbolt sliding home. He thought he was throwing out the trash. He didn't know he was planting a landmine. And 13 years later, standing on his stage, I was finally ready to detonate. I didn't make it far. The storm wasn't just weather. It was a physical weight pressing me into the pavement. I remember walking until my feet went numb. Then until my legs felt like lead. I remember the headlights of a passing car not slowing down, just spraying a wall of dirty water over me. And then I remember the ground coming up to meet my face. I didn't dream. There was just cold. And then jarringly there was warmth. I woke up to the smell of antiseptic and coffee. Not a hospital. It was too quiet for that. It was a private clinic. My clothes were gone, replaced by a dry medical gown. There was an IV in my arm. Sitting in the chair next to the bed wasn't a nurse. It was a woman in a charcoal suit that looked like armor. She was reading the soggy, ink-stained confession my father had forced me to sign. She looked up. Her eyes were sharp, gray, and completely unreadable. "You have a concussion and mild hypothermia," she said. Her voice wasn't motherly. It was the voice of someone who cross-examines people for a living. "I found you 3 miles from the Sterling estate. I'm Catherine." I tried to sit up, but the room spun. "The paper," I croaked. "I have to," he said. If I didn't sign it, he'd call the police. She finished for me. She held up the paper by the corner like it was contaminated evidence. "This is a fascinating document, Wilfred. Your father thinks he's very clever. He thinks this proves you ran away. He thinks this absolves him of child abandonment charges." She folded the paper neatly and put it into her leather portfolio. But in the eyes of the law, a coerced confession from a minor under duress isn't a shield, it's a weapon. And he just handed it to us. I didn't understand. I was 15, terrified and convinced my life was over. "I can't go back," I whispered. He locked the door. "I know," Catherine said. She leaned forward. "And you aren't going back. If I call CPS, they'll put you in the system. Your father will fight it. He has money, he has lawyers, and he has a liar for a younger daughter. You might win, but it will take years, and it will break you." She poured me a glass of water. "Or," she said, "you can disappear. You can let him believe he won. You can let him get comfortable. You can let him think he owns that house, that life, that legacy." She paused, letting the words settle in the quiet room. Thomas Sterling is a narcissist. Narcissists always overreach when they think they're safe. He will make a mistake. He will get greedy. And when he does, you won't just be a victim asking for help. You'll be the executioner. I looked at her. For the first time in my life, someone wasn't looking at me with pity or disdain. She was looking at me like I was an investment. "Why?" I asked. "Because I hate bullies," she said simply. "And I have a spare room." That night, Wilfred Sterling, the victim, died in that clinic. The girl who walked out the next morning was someone else entirely. I didn't cry for my parents. I didn't mourn the sister who betrayed me. I buried them. I spent the next 13 years learning the language of my enemy. I learned law. I learned finance. I learned that patience isn't passivity. It's a siege. Thomas thought he had erased me. He didn't realize he had just sent me to boot camp. Fast forward 13 years. I am 28 years old now. I don't wear hand-me-downs. I wear tailored suits that cost more than my father's car. I work for a firm that specializes in forensic risk auditing. Basically, when a billion-dollar company starts smelling like rot, they send me in to find the dead body. I was sitting in my glass-walled office in Charleston, staring at a spreadsheet that was bleeding red ink. The company name at the top of the file was Sterling Enterprises. Thomas thought he was a titan of industry. The numbers told a different story. He was a gambler on a losing streak, doubling down with money he didn't have. I scrolled to the liabilities tab. There it was. The smoking gun, a $5 million business loan from a private equity firm. The collateral listed, the Sterling Manor, historic waterfront estate, free and clear. I leaned back in my chair and picked up the yellowed, fragile document sitting on my desk. It was my grandmother's will. I had memorized every line, but reading it still gave me a thrill of cold mathematical satisfaction. Clause 4, Section B. The life estate. I grant my son Thomas Sterling a life estate in the Sterling Manor conditional upon his continued guardianship and residence with his biological children until their majority should he abandon, evict, or fail to house any of his heirs. This life estate terminates immediately, and full-fee simple ownership reverts to the eldest living grandchild. It was a reversionary interest clause. My grandmother knew who her son was. She knew he was selfish. She built a legal failsafe to protect us. And 13 years ago, when Thomas forced me to sign that runaway confession and locked me out, he triggered the clause. He didn't just kick out a daughter, he evicted himself. Legally, he hadn't owned that house since the night of the storm. He had been a squatter in my property for over a decade. Most people ask me, "Why did you wait? You could have claimed the house when you turned 18. That's where they misunderstand the nature of justice. Justice isn't a sprint. It's a long game. If I had sued him at 18, I would have gotten the house. Sure, Thomas would have been embarrassed. He would have been homeless. But he would have played the victim. He would have spun a story about his ungrateful daughter stealing his legacy. He would have survived. I didn't want him to survive. I wanted him liquidated. I practiced what we in the industry call strategic default. I fed him rope. I watched from the shadows as he got comfortable. I watched him borrow money he couldn't pay back. I watched him use my house as collateral for his loans. By waiting, I allowed him to upgrade his crime. He wasn't just a bad father anymore. By signing that loan agreement using a property he didn't legally own, he had committed federal bank fraud. I traced the line of his signature on the PDF on my screen. It was arrogant, looping. The signature of a man who thought he was untouchable. He had no idea that the defective asset he threw away had grown up to become the auditor. I checked the date. The Sterling Legacy Gala was tonight. He was planning to announce his comeback. He was going to stand on a stage in a house he stole, toasted by bankers he defrauded, and brag about a legacy he destroyed. I closed my laptop. I picked up the will, the deed, and the runaway confession. It was time to close the account. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. Thomas boomed, trying to regain control of the room. He signaled to the two large men by the door. My daughter is clearly unwell. Please escort her out. The guard stepped forward. I didn't move. I simply held up a single manila folder. If you touch me, I said, my voice amplified by the mic, clear and steady, you will be assaulting the property owner, and I will press charges. The guards hesitated. They looked at Thomas, then at me. In the world of private security, liability is the only language that matters. And I looked like a liability. She's lying. Haley shrieked from the front row. She was 25 now, wearing a dress that cost more than my first car. But she still looked like that 12-year-old girl holding a letter opener. Get her out of here. Daddy, it's over, Dad, I said. The show is over. I pulled a USB drive from my pocket and plugged it into the podium's AV console. I didn't need to hack anything. Thomas's vanity meant the system was always ready for a slideshow of his achievements. The massive screen behind us flickered. The Man of the Year logo vanished. In its place, a high-resolution scan of a legal document appeared. The room went deadly silent. For those of you in the back, I said, this is the last will and testament of Grandma Sterling. Specifically, Clause 4, Section B. Thomas turned around. He saw the document. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse standing upright. "Turn it off!" he screamed, lunging for the console. I stepped aside, letting him fumble with the buttons. He was too late. The words were already burned into the retinas of every banker, investor, and socialite in Charleston. "Read it, Thomas," I said coldly. "It says that your ownership of this estate is a life estate. It is conditional. You only own this house as long as you provide shelter for your biological heirs until they reach the age of majority." I clicked a button on the remote. The image changed. Now the screen showed the runaway confession. The paper was yellowed, water-stained from the storm. The ink of my childish signature shaky and terrified. I, Wyfred Sterling, admit to violent tendencies. I am voluntarily leaving. 13 years ago. I addressed the crowd. Thomas Sterling forced a 15-year-old girl to sign this lie to avoid jail. He then locked her out of this house during a tropical depression. I turned to my father. He was shaking, his hands gripping the podium for support. "You thought this paper was your shield, Dad. You thought it proved I ran away, but under the terms of the will, it proves abandonment." I moved closer, letting the microphone catch every ragged breath he took. "The moment you locked that deadbolt, you violated the life estate," I said. "Ownership reverted to the eldest grandchild." I pointed to myself. "Me?" A ripple went through the crowd. No theatrics, just the realization they were watching a downfall unfold. "You've been trespassing for 13 years, I continued. "Throwing parties in my living room, sleeping in my bedroom." "You can't," Thomas sputtered. "I paid the taxes. You paid rent, and only because you were too busy stealing." One click revealed a slide. Sterling Enterprises loan agreement collateral. 12 Ocean View Drive. "You used a house you don't own to secure a $5 million loan," I said, voice flat. "That's bank fraud." And because the paperwork crossed state lines, mail fraud. Bankers stood. Phones came out. Faces hardened. He saw it too. The walls closing in. "You ruined everything," Thomas shouted. He lunged, fist raised. Before he reached me, a voice rang out. "Federal marshals." Judge Catherine stepped forward, unrobed, but unmistakably in command. "I'm the judge who signed your sealed indictment," she said. U.S. Marshals stormed the room and tackled him. "Thomas Sterling, you are under arrest for bank fraud, wire fraud, and aggravated assault." The handcuffs snapped shut louder than applause. He screamed for help from me, for anyone. I leaned down. "Not a mistake. An audit. You failed." He was dragged out. Silence followed. I faced my mother and sister. Their fear was no longer my responsibility. "He's your father." My mother sobbed. "He destroyed himself." I answered. She begged, blamed fear, claimed victimhood. I corrected her with the truth. She had stood by and watched. 2 envelopes. "Eviction notices," I said. 1 hour. "Take nothing that isn't yours." "Where do we go?" Haley whispered. "You always wanted to be the only child," I told her. "Now, take care of Mom." I listened to the frantic exit, bags, sobbing, the final slam of the door. For the first time in 13 years, the house was quiet. 3 months later, I sold it, paid the legitimate debts, cleared the ledger, and walked away with the surplus and a clean slate. People romanticize forgiveness. I don't. I settle the accounts. Justice balances the books. Debts get paid by the people who incurred them.